to give, there it is.
Thank you. Sorry
Um,
about that.
all good. To give an overall status update of the project and get your general feedback on the direction and serving as our community liaisons at a higher level when we're not doing specific targeted outreach. We'll also provide our deliverables, which will be delivered as a series of technical memos for your review as well. So we're looking forward to getting your input and feedback as leaders in your community. So first section is we're going to kind of go a little bit into the overall project background and goals, kind of where are we at today on day one of the project. So this chart represents the monthly ridership for Ulster County Area Transit, and we're looking about a decade's worth of data. The maroon pinkish color is fixed route service, so your typical bus that comes on the schedule, same alignment. And the blue represents demand response, which is typically used more for people with disabilities or aging, things like that, service you call. So starting back in 2012, UCAT did their 2012 Transit Development Plan, and this plan was followed by 2 years of pretty impressive growth, about 20% increase in ridership. This reached its peak in terms of pre-2019, right around the end of 2014. So the years after that were characterized by relative plateau and stability for a couple of years before seeing a slight decrease heading into 2019, nothing too major. 2019 is when UCAT absorbs Kingston City Bus and the handful of routes that operate in the city of Kingston. And understandably, more routes, more riders, you saw a spike in ridership. Varied a little bit month to month. We were going into 2020 feeling pretty strong. And then the pandemic. We're all familiar with that. And like every transit agency in the United States, ridership plummeted. So since that point, it's been kind of a slow and steady recovery. Again, very similar to trends we've seen at peer agencies across the country. It was also during this time that UCAT made a decision to go fare free. That was in October of 2022. And that's been part of this ridership recovery story. You know, it's hard to ascertain what is a result of going fare free versus what is natural growth, but it is something important kind of in the history and development of where we're at. So where are we going from here? We talked in our smaller group preparing this presentation, and we were trying to think of like what are the big trends that are informing this project. One is several members of UCTC and UCAT mentioned that there's an ongoing housing affordability issue in Ulster County, and this sort of has two different impacts we have to be aware of. First, it's changing where people live, so we have to think about what are the origins and the trip generators and the areas we need to connect. It also may be impacting overall how much households have to spend on transportation. It might be the difference between if they keep their second car or try to go to a one car household or a one car to a zero car. And does the transportation system need to hypothetically respond to this mode shift? Another thing that we're being mindful of is just rapid advancements in microtransit in the last 5 years or so. And I'll get to that in next slide in a bit more detail. And then finally, we're aware of the county's overall goal of a fully electrified vehicle fleet by 2035. So we want to make sure that the project is aware of that, not looming, but that upcoming deadline and making sure the system can respond to that. So talking through, I guess, everything we've seen so far and the major things that we're expecting in the future, we've developed 4 project goals. The first goal is that we want to increase UCAT ridership and the overall transit mode share in Ulster County, encouraging people to shift over from perhaps single occupancy vehicles to transit. We want to develop recommendations that are adaptable to electric fleet transition. Going fully electric, it's unfortunately not as simple as just switching out a gas-powered bus for a battery electric or a hydrogen. There's a lot more nuance to the transition. We want to embrace new mobility models, particularly microtransit, in the UCAT service area where it's appropriate. We're not going to force it if it's not the best solution. And then finally, we want to help UCAT adopt a new technology platform to really operate all of their services and bring a lot of sort of disparate platforms and tools into one suite. So a bit more on microtransit. Microtransit has really taken off in the last 5 years, and how it operates is it's similar to demand response services that many agencies will operate now, but it's more open to the general public. It's typically more interconnected with technology like apps, a similar experience maybe if you were calling like Uber or Lyft or something like that. And it allows agencies to be more strategic about where are we investing in fixed route service that has the density and ridership to support it, and where can we look at ridership or where can we look at microtransit as providing necessary coverage of areas that just don't have the density to support more typical forms of transit, but provide them the connections, whether it's to other transit lines or local destinations. We'll be building off a study that Foursquare ITP participated in 2021, the Connect Mid-Hudson study, that started to identify within the Tri-County region preliminary zones that could qualify for microtransit. And then finally, we're aware that Ulster County applied for the, forget that acronym, the NYSERDA Clean Neighborhood Challenge a few years back. Weren't successful, but my understanding is that there was a lot of excitement in the community about this potential new technology. So we want to build on that and help move this technology forward in Ulster County. So some final notes on project understanding and just describing our approach to these projects from the Foursquare ITP side. We're going to be data driven, including a very data intensive market and service analysis that I'll expand on later. But we also really value the qualitative public feedback, both with riders and non-riders, who's riding, who's not riding, and why not, as well as key stakeholders like this group, and talking to frontline staff, talking to your operators and your dispatchers to understand what's going well, what's maybe not working. We will work to develop recommendations that reflect best practices in the industry and are also contextualized to reflect the specific goals and challenges facing UCAT, facing Ulster County in general. And that's, includes service frequency expectations, fleet electrification, labor shortages. We've seen that sort of as a nationwide trend affecting the transit industry. Your goals regarding having a more kind of cohesive technology and tracking system, and also just needs for additional bus storage. So with that, I'll go into the actual project scope and how it's going to sort of the architecture of the project. We have a big open Q&A question at the end, so I want to save most questions for that. But any brief questions, I guess, on the project understanding before I continue to talk your ear off?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, great. All right. So going into the project scope. Task 1 is project coordination. This is mainly related to just logistics, project management. So this just includes our regular meetings with the smaller UCAT, UCTC team, these TAC meetings, as well as just progress reports. Pretty standard. Project 2 is related to our engagement and outreach. So it's the project team communication and public engagement plan. So after this meeting and getting y'all's input on overall project direction, one of our first steps is to develop the public engagement plan, or PEP. This PEP is really going to be focused on what are the questions we're asking, what are the goals of engagement, and we'll aim to capture like a robust cross-section of public and stakeholder feedback. Based on our experience with projects of this nature, this size, typical elements that we include in these PEPs may include a transit survey available online that's asking both prospective and current riders their perceptions, their preferences, and their priorities and what they want to see in their transit network. Public and stakeholder meetings, so targeted groups like this, as well as a mix of maybe more open public forums. And then finally, what we call in-reach. And this is talking to frontline staff, operators, dispatchers, and getting a sense from them what's working, or when we start diving into recommendations, what are maybe some issues that we need to be aware for that the data doesn't readily indicate. So deliverables associated with this task, the draft and final public engagement plan were scoped for 3 rounds of engagement. That would include a combination of those 3 points that we're anticipating will be the major sort of parts of the engagement. The transit survey itself, and then a final technical memo outlining everything that was done and what we heard, the overall results.
Thanks. I just want to interject, if I may, Jared, that we will share the public engagement plan with the technical advisory committee, and we welcome your input on that. We probably will not have a face-to-face meeting, but I will circulate that document and ask for some feedback if you have any to offer. The point being that we really, as Jared mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're looking to our technical advisory committee members to assist us to a certain extent with public outreach. If there are groups or other agencies, mailing lists, other stakeholders that you have a connection to, we would very much appreciate your assistance as we try to publicize our surveys and the overall kickoff of the project.
Thank you, Brad. Okay. Task 3 is what we call our baseline route profiles and transit market analysis. And this is a longer name for what we typically refer to as existing conditions. Incremental changes in land use, demographics, travel behavior may mean that a service that was really effectively designed in the past 10, 15 years ago just hasn't kept up and may no longer reflect the needs of the community. So looking at a lot of data sources is really critical to understanding the strengths and needs of the UCAT network, as well as the needs of Ulster County. So we look at this from 2 sides. First, we look at demand to see like, where is transit needed? Is transit there currently? As well as the supply, looking at a lot of the performance data with the existing routes, which routes are doing well, which routes aren't doing so hot, and starting to think of how we can improve them. So on the demand side, the team's going to look at overall population and job density in the UCAT service area. Density really is one of the main things that guarantees successful transit. We'll look at the spatial distribution of specific demographic groups that we know are more likely to rely on transit: low income, 0-car households, persons with disabilities, etc. And this is our attempt to bring in, a focus on equity groups, people that not just would enjoy transit, but actually rely on it. And then we'll also look at travel flow data to look at the predominant travel patterns in Ulster County. Does the transit network sync up with those? Are there big travel behaviors that we're not capturing that provide an opportunity? So that all kind of is how we think of like demand for transit. On the supply side, the main deliverable we're going to develop is what we call diagnostic route profiles. And this is just taking a lot of the data from UCAT and going route by route and looking at its overall productivity, its ridership, its on-time performance, its characteristics, and just figuring out this route's a super strong performer within the system as a whole, or this one is really one of the weaker routes. And at the end, the profiles will be very data heavy, but at the end, they'll also include like a qualitative summary of this is why the route's doing well, this is why it's not, along with some preliminary ideas on how we can improve things. There are many options in the planning toolkit, some of which are kind of like, oh, if on-time performance is doing poorly, that might be a scheduling thing, that might be avoiding streets with a lot of congestion. So we'll start to spitball preliminary suggestions. So in summary, we'll look at both supply and demand to identify opportunities for service improvement and expansion. And the deliverables associated with this task are 2 tech memos, one on the market analysis, and one that's a compilation of the route profiles. Task 4 is where we start to put pens to paper and do some actual route planning. So service alternatives and the cost benefit analysis. So using all the data and inputs we get from task 2 and 3, we'll develop 2 service scenarios aimed at improving the effectiveness and efficiency of public transportation in Ulster County. So these scenarios will look at possibly realigning routes, extending routes, creating new routes altogether, looking at new possible modes. This is where microtransit, we're hoping, will play a role, looking at revising spans or frequencies, level of service in general, and etc. Um, so these two scenarios will be vetted by UCAT staff as well as the members of this committee before being presented to the public as sort of two different visions for what transit could look like. Um, these are not intended to be a binary choice of just getting the public to pick one or the other, but getting their feedback of we like this element, we're less crazy about this element, and that the final scenario will probably try to include uh, different recommendations for both scenarios. So there will be a technical memo on these two scenarios. So after we've gone back out to the public and gotten their feedback on scenario A, scenario B, we'll work in task 5, which is developing the final preferred service scenario. And we'll start to do feasibility testing, making sure that it's field tested, the routes are doable, things like that. We'll develop a bit more detail into the recommendations themselves and flesh out the details, the operating resources that are required, the anticipated schedule, headway, frequency, things like that. We'll also provide a general equity assessment of this preferred network, making sure that it's in compliance with general FTA guidance on Title VI, as well as UCAT specific Title VI parameters. And we'll also provide some detailed scheduling support for the final recommendations, getting really nitty gritty into the operations to make sure that it is feasible within any sort of resource constraints. 2 deliverables with this task, the draft and final transit development plan, as well as a detailed timetable and rostering plan. Task 6 is called service launch and optimization. And our team will work with UCAT and UCTC to develop a service monitoring plan of key metrics that should be measured and key intervals. And we'll identify sort of a series of general categories related to performance, including overall reliability, efficiency, customer satisfaction, and safety, to list a few examples. And the entire purpose of this service monitoring plan is to give UCAT the tools and sort of the schedule to be tracking the efficiency of these recommendations at a more regular level. So it's not waiting until the next, TDP or other big study to kind of assess which recommendations are doing well, which maybe should be revisited. We'll also advise UCAT and UCTC on best practices for marketing and educational campaigns for just helping inform the community of the upcoming changes and sort of maintaining community engagement. So this may include direct outreach, meetings, events, print marketing and materials, digital marketing materials. And this task will be summated in 2 technical memos, one related to service monitoring and one related to engagement and education. Finally, task 7, last one. This is our system technology analysis and recommendations. UCAT very specifically is looking to consolidate multiple duplicative technologies and sort of have a uniform hardware and software solution that can do a lot of its data needs, scheduling, routing, vehicle and operational management. So our team will supplement software evaluations with real world case studies that kind of document how different agencies use different tools and what those agencies have in common with UCAT, sort of a similar context, similar requirements and circumstances. Our final goal being working collaboratively with UCAT to develop something that's turnkey, cloud-based, and has been kind of vetted by both these technical memos as well as UCAT staff feedback and preferences, finding a tool that can meet all their needs that they're looking forward to using. And the final deliverable of the final task is a technical memo related to our findings here. Whew. All right. That was a lot I threw at you. Again, if there are any brief questions on that section, we have the wider Q&A at the end. But if there's any immediate burning thoughts.
No, great,
Okay.
great overview, Jared. I appreciate it. And I just, I, I hope everyone understands that, and probably at this point, after seeing the overview, should understand that we're really at a pivotal point here in UCAT's history. Since the takeover of Kingston City Bus in 2019, and then the enormous difficulties that everyone faced during the pandemic, we're really in a unique position now after we've gotten our legs back underneath us after the pandemic and have made it through into a stage of recovery. We're in a really unique position to plot where UCAT goes from here with a strong focus on customer satisfaction. So that's really where I think this project is poised to take us.
All right. Luckily that was the longest part of the presentation, so it gets quicker from here. Project schedule and next steps. This Gantt chart is sort of the tentative project schedule that we originally proposed. Kickoff being the first week in February, so we are here. We originally envisioned like a 6-month timeline. Talking with UCTC, we're probably going to go at least a month longer just to make sure that we have appropriate windows for public comment period. And in terms of our next TAC meeting, we're envisioning something near the end of April, just when we'll have results of not only the engagement, but also sort of a lot of results of our market analysis and our demand analysis to share with you all. And like Brian said, we'll probably reach out just via email before then, excuse me, to get your input and comments on the public engagement plan. But we're thinking end of April-ish for our next formal committee meeting. Immediate next steps is we're going to get to work on the public engagement plan so we can get that to UCAT and UCTC and eventually this group as soon as possible. And we've already begun to do some of the data collection, census data, economic data, the actual performance data from UCAT to start churning through that analysis and working to the deliverables in task 3. Okay. Excited now to have someone else talk. So we have one sort of, let's call it icebreaker question, and then we'll kind of open up the discussion just to kind of general Q&A.
So, Jared, this is Dennis. I have one icebreaker question. If you could touch a little bit on communications with the TAC and where data is going to be available and how we intend to communicate so that we have a clear indication if the TAC has a question or if the TAC has needs or is looking for data where we are in the study, they have a place to go and we have a place to go.
Yeah, I think what we talked about is that Brian will sort of be the original point of contact. I mean, feel free to copy me on any email questions as well, but Brian will serve as sort of the immediate first point to pass information along to the rest of the team. There is a project website that is still, I think, relatively empty, but as things start to develop, the project website will also be another resource. In terms of document review, I think we can talk about whether it's something we email out or we can certainly have a shared document that anyone can access and comment on.
Yeah, we're kind of hoping that either a SharePoint file, a Dropbox, or something of that nature where we can put materials from the project and people can not get lost in emails. They can sort of, and we could set that SharePoint file up so that it's by task, so you can look in the files by task.
Okay.
Or if it's not that, more depending on how much we generate, but we're hoping that Foursquare could do that. If not, we can work through it on our end, but we would prefer that if you would do that, and then we would basically have a single repository of all the project documents. And while we're going to have a project website, a lot of the documents we may be working on may not be shareable with the public until such time that they're approved.
Okay, yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. This PowerPoint's already in a public SharePoint folder that I had shared with the smaller team. So I can work to make sure the permissions are expanded and that we just send out the same link every time. And yeah, so yeah, we'll work to make that a very clear workflow.
And I just want to ask the members of the TAC not to share the links to the SharePoint file.
I'll make sure to put some notation about internal use only,
Yeah.
as a reminder. All right. So for our first or only icebreaker, if you can actually get out your phones or your browsers or something, we're going to do a brief interactive activity. To where you can go to menti.com, MENTI, and enter that code 51968383. Or if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code and it should bring you to our activity immediately. And let me drop this info in the chat just so it's not beholden to a slide. Just a sec. Chat go. Josh or Brian, would one of you mind dropping these details just in the chat?
In the chat.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll get on that.
Thank you. Okay. So the plan, as when we went for it, was called the route optimization plan. But when we started chatting internally, we're not sure if this really fully captures the extent of what this project aims to do. It's a little technical. So we wanted your thoughts on a different name. And we've set up essentially just a word cloud. So you should be able to submit up to 3 words or phrases each. And this will just sort of display them in real time. And we kind of just want to get the ball rolling on, before we go out to the public. Is route optimization a little too technical, a little too what have you? Not going to criticize the name, but we just wanted to make sure, get thoughts on a rebrand of sorts before we start.
I put a lot of thought into this name, Jared. I'm a little upset that we might have to abandon it, but not really.
You can always vote for yourself. I might be able to tell, but redesign, yeah, bus network redesigns are all of the rage.
I don't
right
think
now.
we've ever had awesome in one of our project titles, but this is the first time for anything.
Rethinking, I like that. The only one I'll push back on if someone suggests Better Bus, only because I can think of it probably 3 major agencies that are all branding their services like their redesigns as that right now. So
and we're working on 2.
Yeah, it's becoming a little cliche.
Building a better bus system.
If somebody's probably copyrighted it.
Yeah.
I should have done that like 3 years ago. Like, great. So I'll give everyone like one more minute or so. Rethinking. I like 2 rethinks. All right.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I think this looks great. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. And with that, we're now just kind of ready more for open discussion. We listed some project goals and we've talked about it would be nice if we can sort of translate these goals into sort of a mission statement or a vision for the project. Or if you have questions about the goals or think maybe they need to be retooled or if we're missing something, as well as just any general questions, about the process or things that we need to look at before we get started. We're really opening up the floor.
Vin, go right ahead.
Yes, I have a question, Jared. When you're studying existing routes and the data associated with that, ridership, etc., that's really kind of like analyzing status quo, obviously, but it doesn't tell a whole lot about why people aren't riding or on that route or other routes. In other words, it doesn't get to the why. So in a sense, it's kind of like sort of looking through the rearview mirror a bit, you know, and rather than looking forward to say, you know, how can we get this you know, system to serve more people in a better way, you know. So I somewhere in the surveying, I think somewhere in the surveying it would be helpful to ask people from various walks of life as to why do they, first of all, do they even know that a public transportation system exists? And if they know, why aren't they using it?
Sure. Survey will definitely have.
Jared, could you do us a favor? Just take yourself off of the whole screen so that we can kind of see each other.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. To get to your point, Vin, for sure, the survey will kind of, you know, we've done some surveys before where they're almost forked. And the very first question is, do you ride transit right now? And if you do, it takes people down sort of a first logic tree of, okay, what route, what's working, yada, yada, yada. If you don't, sometimes the survey goes, okay, why not? What would it take? And that's when we can start to see like, oh, maybe it's, you know, this is less of an issue now with fare free, but is the fare an obstacle? Or does the route not go where you need to go? And that maybe tells us maybe we're not meeting all the coverage needs, or people don't want to wait. So that tells us maybe we need to focus on frequency and making it more appealing because people don't want to wait 30, 45 minutes. But you're right that, you know, we'll definitely need the survey engagement to kind of get a sense of why aren't people riding. The route profiles will just tell us what services, what lines are succeeding. Because if anything, it's like, you know what, if this is UCAT's strongest line, and by general, both for UCAT in general, has strong ridership and strong performance, we probably want to minimally touch that. And it's like, okay, maybe that's something we inherit versus this one's performing so poorly anyway. This is a prime candidate for rethinking, reallocating resources, things of that nature.
It's an excellent point, Vin, and we'll be cognizant of it, as well as us being cognizant of, I think during the previous route redesign, when we did take over Kingston City Bus, we learned some hard lessons in that we have some customers who obviously rely on the system. They know the system well, and they're not happy if we start to make changes to the system because they've learned how to make it work for them. So it's a dual-edged sword that we'll be very careful with as we move forward, because we do want to encourage more people to take the bus, but certainly not at the expense of those who rely on it. Alan, and then Scott.
Okay. The title of the study is route optimization, but one question I have is, through this exercise, will you be looking at potentially adding routes? So not just focused on optimizing the existing routes, but really analyzing whether the existing routes are as effective as they could be, but whether there are other areas that should be served that currently aren't served.
Certainly on the table.
Yeah,
I guess the only thing
I think the short answer is yes. You know.
Okay.
Right, and we'll be looking at, I mean, microtransit potentially can begin to address that. We've been toying like a kitten with a ball of yarn with the idea of microtransit in Ulster County for some time, and I think we're all very interested in pursuing it because it seems to offer a lot of potential for our riders. But there's also the issue of cost, and cost will be on the table as well. So in some instances, we may have the resources to consider system expansion. But in other instances, we may have to ask ourselves, well, we can expand service if we expand service in one place, we may have to take away service in another, because we are limited. We're limited by the number of buses, by the number of drivers, and by capital resources. But I think some level of expansion should definitely be on the table.
So if I can, I'm sorry. Thanks for that, Brian. I just want to go back. Alan's question gets to the name issue. which is why when we had this internal discussion, we weren't really happy about it. One, it's planner speak, and two is, or transit speak, and two is, it does suggest that there is not an open-mindedness with respect to what we're doing here relative to the number of routes and the types of routes. I would point out that there is some scenario planning here. And that scenario planning has with it a cost benefit analysis. And that's one of the things I was going to ask. One of the things we're trying to do is, as we look at where people want to go and how we can get them there, how do we make those decisions that essentially for route expansion or route changes that make sure that we're trying to meet priority issues, as well as some of the other demands for transit within the county. And this is a very difficult county to provide transit for, but we may end up with a scenario that says this is what a system looks like that satisfies what we think needs to be done, and this is what it's going to cost. And that may not be able to be borne by our current funding sources.
Thank you. Scott, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I've got a question, and this is, for Jared and maybe for Brian and Dennis. A public, participation is really important in kind of learning about this crucial market of people who don't ride transit, who we would like to have riding transit. What are some methods for getting those people involved in this and kind of avoiding the hardcore advocates who, want to see, change and they want it now? How do you get to this group of people who, they're not likely to get out, and participate in a study like this, but they're like a potential, like, oh, I go to Poughkeepsie every day, and you've got a route that goes to Poughkeepsie, that market right there. How do you reach out? What are some methods that your firm uses, and how are we going to ensure that we have a well-rounded public participation effort that captures those market segments, that may not be as vocal?
Great question, Scott. Jared?
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. Some projects I've been on, there's been an opportunity to win a gift card of sorts for completing a survey. So, some people are suddenly much more willing to do a brief survey if there's a $25 gift card. And that also leads to one thing, is we have to be mindful of, yeah, we want this survey to tell us a lot, but we don't want people burning out halfway through. It has to be accessible and not overly burdensome time-wise, or like from a concept. You don't want to get a headache trying to fill out a survey. As well as accessible, like, to various languages. Other elements is just thinking about what kind of events are you advertising at to capture these people who aren't going to be looking for a transit themed survey, aren't on like any transit listservs. You mentioned people who want to go to Kingston. If there are local Kingston groups that post regularly, or if there's some sort of Kingston event that has nothing to do with transit, does the county or the transit agency try to get a booth or at least a poster there to be like, oh, how'd you get to Kingston today? Oh, you drove? Did you know there was a bus? I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. So taking advantage of existing events, and because sometimes public meetings for transit are not something that's going to get a lot of people rearing to go to, and can sometimes be inaccessible time-wise for people who don't work a typical 9 to 5 and can go to an after-work event. So I think trying to leverage existing community resources and strategically insert UCAT there is another option, on top of just, I think, traditional digital marketing. I've done some projects with a Facebook advertising campaign, just because it's a relatively inexpensive way to get a lot of people. Particularly if you have
You can reach into,
yeah,
you can reach into individual businesses, larger businesses, employers, and distribute. You can do pop-up events at particular areas. Coffee shops are always a good one to do pop-up events, particularly early in the morning. So we've done those on other studies. The the critical thing in my mind is not only asking the question at the study level. We've had a continuing and ongoing discussion with respect to UCAT is they spend $0 on marketing. So once you have a decent service, if you don't market that service and let people know about it, why, you know, those ads that you can take out on social media platforms, et cetera, you know, we need to essentially look at, particularly with respect to where we are in terms of climate. We need to sort of look at this in a much more robust way to say that if you're not taking the bus, you should, and here's why. Not only are you saving dollars, but you're actually saving the planet. So there's a really good reason for us to do more marketing, and we've continued to have this discussion with UCAT over the years, but when you're trying to keep, you know, basically trying to keep the fleet running, marketing doesn't sound like it's a really good use of dollars, but in point of fact, particularly as we make scheduling changes, it's an imperative use of dollars.
I can't find the hand. I'm sorry. I've
That's fine.
having those Zooms since the pandemic. I'm used to the Teams. So my question is, I find that some of the community around here, I'm talking Kingston High School, they are not using the transit because they don't know about it, and they are it's hard for them to understand the routes, the times, the stops. There's no graphics that shows where you stop. There's I've tried to download the times and it's very hard to understand it. There's a high community, a number of ENL, English as a new language students here that are either Spanish or Quechua, so it's hard for them to understand it. They're a little bit intimidated. So the stops are not even, very friendly in terms of languages. Is there a way to put signs in Spanish or other languages? I'm just, giving the input of my community and my population and the students here that might really use this transit to go to places, and they are the ones that really have no transportation other than the bus, and they pay very expensive rides for X or Y particular friend to bring them to Walmart, to Target, to downtown, to jobs. And if they knew, I feel like they don't know how to use it, and that's why they don't use it. So maybe making it more friendly to understand these routes. I don't know how long has it been the same route, but if I try to, and I've tried in the past to download the times that the bus stops and where it stops, is not very friendly to understand.
Excellent points. I think it speaks to something that Dennis had just mentioned regarding marketing, and there will be a marketing component at the tail end of this project where we think about, okay, now that we've created a model that we are ready to put out there and pursue, how do we market it to the people? And UCAT already has some tools in place that I think can perhaps benefit from receiving a wider audience. That for some time you can use your phone to find where the bus is and see what routes are available. But that's another element of the technology overview that we'll be doing an evaluation to see what kind of technology can assist us both internally in managing the internal components of running a bus system, but also scheduling and publicity for folks who want to use the system as well. Jared,
So,
Dennis.
yeah, just because this is sort of indicative of what we're learning and expanding on. The county UCAT already does sort of a how to ride the bus seminars, and they're typically directed at some of the elderly. And you go into community rooms and deal with that way. So the question I would have back is if we were going to look at marketing is not just about advertisement, it's also about the kind of things that encourage people to and show them how to ride the bus. So the question then comes back to the entity is where would be the best place to sort of start a how to ride the bus programs for those folks that are that have language challenges or other challenges associated with the public outreach that we're currently doing. And that's a really good point. And I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm just saying that's something we need to think about.
I think Dennis, there are a few things that come to top of mind. One is, there are senior clubs all over that meet regularly all over Ulster County, but there are also faith-based organizations that meet and so on. So those are good places to start. The other thing I wanted to say was that, with respect to enhancing commuter routes, I'll just use an example of Route 28. I would love to take the bus to and from, because UCAT is literally right on the same complex where I work, but I would have, getting my car to a place where I could catch the bus easily is a real challenge. So there are really no park and rides available as far as I know. Maybe there are on Route 28. So therefore I don't use the bus for commutation as much as I would like to. So I'm thinking there are probably a lot of people who, I know New Paltz has one, so that makes it a little easier, but I suspect there are a lot of people for environmental reasons, for reasons of just being able to relax on the way to work and maybe get some work done or whatever, would entertain commuting by public transit, but it's not very convenient, I think. And I know this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but it's just, from one perspective.
Yeah. But I can speak to that a little bit. And that would we do our market analysis. We look at densities as kind of like a first cut. But Foursquare, we also have our propensity model, which starts to aggregate a lot of different, more specific like demographic subgroups. And we break it into a few different indices. So for two of the indices, we have our transit-oriented population model or index, and that looks at a lot of these sort of demographic subgroups that are typically priorities for equity and that we just know historically are more likely to rely on transit, not just for commuting, but for all-day service. Like they needed to run any errand flat out. And so we'll look at that where those populations are concentrated, try to connect them and match their needs. We have another index that's a commuting population index that's just more likely to look at people who are more likely to commute, like, probably like a one-car household where they could drive, but maybe it's just a little bit more of a pain. And then we start to be strategic about like, okay, maybe these areas, they don't have the right demographic or density profile to support an all-day route, but you might be able to entice them with a commuter option that gets them to like a very specific destination in basically rush hour weekdays only. The park and ride question, I haven't gotten into the data to see the existing infrastructure, but I have seen in some communities that like church parking lots are actually very common to use for that. If you can reach an agreement with them, since they are not empty most of the week, but they're not reaching their demand or capacity Monday through Friday in rush hour. So it very much kind of utilizes existing resources.
Good points. Mark.
Yeah, just a quick, couple thoughts. One, maybe just specifically on the marketing analysis. Do you envision running the transit propensity model outside of Ulster County? So will you be looking at, say, the surrounding communities to Ulster, say like in Dutchess, it could be the, Poughkeepsie up through Red Hook, Rhinebeck areas?
It's a good question. Like I haven't looked because part of it would say, depending on how many routes and how far they run into those counties, might say like, yes, we should look at propensity. The other thing with propensity is that it's a relative measure. So it goes like the ultimate result is a metric of lower to higher propensity in the various indices, whether it's transit-oriented populations, commuter, job, destination, what have you.
Yeah.
But it scores all that relative based off the total concentration of the area you're looking at. So
Right.
I think what we have to be mindful of is, and I'll admit, like I'm still getting familiar with the area in detail. If there's another city that's hypothetically a lot more dense than Kingston, including that city would probably wash out a lot
Throw
of
it out.
Ulster.
Yeah.
For example, if you ran propensity on Ulster County and Manhattan, Ulster
Yep.
County would show low propensity probably everywhere because the density metrics of Manhattan would just completely
Sure.
throw everything off. So that's what we would have to be mindful of, is making sure, like, are the built environment conditions similar enough between the counties that we're not washing things out.
Yeah, yeah, we probably would not want to wash out, the Ulster County focus. I suppose the commuting journey to work flows will speak to that a little bit. And I'm just curious on that piece, that's coming from the BLS or Bureau of Labor Statistics data, or is that ACS driven?
For which one? Sorry.
The journey to work, the workflows.
We've been using as a firm and a lot of agencies Replica, which is a
Okay,
newer
sure.
technology that's modeled.
Yeah.
It's great because it's standard across the country, so it's not spending a ton of resources having to match geographies that aren't congruent and different data assumptions.
Yep.
And with that, even if we keep propensity to just like an Ulster focus, it's really easy to say replica. Let's look at the full region so that we can
Yep.
see if there's a desire for external connection into Dutchess County. We
Sure.
know it's at point A, point B.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess, and maybe just kind of big picture and kind of circling back to what Alan had mentioned and how how this study gets named. I'm just curious from a philosophical standpoint, when we look at this, are we looking at like a blank slate? Like, this is how we would create a system, an ideal system now based on the conditions on the ground or what we expect might happen in the future? Or are we more tweaking on the margins of the existing system that we have now and kind of really focusing, I would say maybe on the poor performing routes or the underserved areas? I'm just curious how big of the scope is this, or how much appetite does Ulster County have for like breaking the system and re-looking at everything? Because it's a tough thing to do. And I would just mention that Dutchess County, we just finished up a transit study last year. So I actually should I'll send that over to Brian because it's got our recommendations that are driving the service changes that we're contemplating right now. And we do talk about transit propensity in that also. So, but I'm just curious from a big picture standpoint, how big are we going with this?
I can tell you that the appetite at the county level is to go big. I can tell you that right now. The appetite is to essentially, I don't think we can change the community patterns or the commutation patterns, but the idea of is a hub and spoke system, for example, the best way to meet these patterns, or is there another way that you can do that? My sense is that it's bigger than route optimization.
And I think too, that's one of the strengths of the fact that we're going to do 2 preliminary scenarios is we don't have to, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have maybe one scenario is a tweak and the other is a redesign. And then the other point we'll add on is just that's part of why we do the route profiles. If we have a route that's performing strong, is relegated to a corridor and relatively, regular schedule, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Maybe it gets renamed or something, or but I'm not going to avoid a strong route just for the sake of because I didn't come up with it.
I mean,
And
I think really it's a matter of like really reimagining public transit, reimagining your ride. So it's not just like, how can we do what we've always done, just incrementally better? But if we're talking about going big, then we really have to really think outside of the box and really be much more creative in terms of what the possibilities are. You know, I think that for the reasons that Dennis mentioned about climate being on top of people's minds, and you know, and of course the savings, but also making public transportation really cool, you know, really something that people want to do rather than just, oh, it's just some nondescript service that's in the background of my, you know, my awareness.
You know, Vincent, you're speaking our language 100%. You know, we are very data driven and we like to certainly dive deep into everything that's available to us. But the other side of things is that, you know, service planning, it's an art too. And it really is a matter of looking at not only the data, but thinking about what people have to say and really understanding what their transit history and their transit usage is and what their story is. You know, why are they using the system and why are they not using the system? You know, to your point earlier, you know, we need to figure out what are the, you know, the limiting factors to people getting on transit. And then really being as creative as possible, coming up with solutions with you guys and the folks out in the public, and the people who operate transit to really develop a full platter of options, and then figuring out from those options which ones work best together so that we can provide better services for people and cool services that people want to use as well. And that's what we're really here to do.
Tatiana, did you have your hand up?
In a different way, but yes. I just have a question. How open is the whole model to add routes that are short distance rather than long distance? And my question is based on the ENL population that walks to school, and they live in 1.5 miles from school. They don't get a bus. And there is a lot of 80% of the population walks to school. And so that's my main, that's basically why I approach the mayor about, what can we do to get better attendance in our, ENL population, because they don't live 10 miles away. They live 1.5 miles away or so from the school, but they're not used to the weather. They don't have the proper, jackets, shoes. It's dark and all of the above. And that is causing a lot of issues here at school because they don't get a bus. Are you open to add smaller routes for them, or is it something that you will be thinking it's doable, or is it too much to ask because it's not far? I just have a lot of questions regarding that.
I think we're open, certainly within the city of Kingston, and building off of some of the ambitious plans we had after the initial takeover of Kingston City Bus. But Jared, I think this might also speak to the issue of frequency, right?
Might also speak to, yeah, I think there's a few different options. Like, so one, a shorter route can run more frequent with the same number of buses because it's not spending as much time driving, right? This is also sometimes microtransit is actually the better way to kind of what we sometimes call first and last mile trips that are more likely to be shorter. So maybe if a fixed route bus service, just like it's hard to build the market demand to make that short trip, maybe the entire community is in a microtransit zone where students can call. And typically how microtransits operate is it can either be any point to any point, like an Uber, or sometimes it can be they'll pick you up anywhere, but it only delivers to it only actually stops at a few key points, so like a shopping center, a school, a connection to another transit service. So that might be, it circulates around, picks up students, and will either drop them off at school or drop them off at the outlet mall or something like that. But in terms of shorter routes, that's also, I think, another consideration when we think about the electric fleet transition, because one of the limitations of battery electric buses is they typically can't go as long on a charge that a gas bus can on a tank of gas. And that isn't just the length of the route itself, but how many different shifts you have, how often UCAT in the background keeps the bus on the road. So I think there's lots of considerations for why a shorter may be beneficial in that regard.
But improved service in the city of Kingston is probably, I think it has a lot of potential in the city of Kingston because of the density, it being the highest density community in Ulster County. That this is an area where we have a lot of potential to make some positive changes.
I'm glad to hear that because it will improve our attendance significantly.
Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap things up today? Great discussion.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
Oh, I was just going to suggest if you, I think it would be important, looking, this is forward looking, but, to work with the school districts, the colleges to get their students involved in this process, because, they're some of the younger students or the students that don't have access to a car. This is, the bus is a really effective way to help them get around town and to move around. And maybe just try to change the mindset, within the community about, looking at transit instead of as a last resort choice for transportation as, a first choice, for some of the reasons you cited, benefit to the environment, more cost effective. And I think as you enhance the service and provide more frequency, that'll be an easier sell. But, there's been a lot of changes, over my lifetime where, it started with an education, just at the local school level, and there might be an opportunity there to change minds.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to add, certainly public involvement early and often especially on transit planning is essential. And I was just curious on the public survey component. It sounds like it's going to be an online survey. Any thoughts about paper surveys or getting surveys onto buses? I mean, that's in the works also.
I think it's completely doable.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
I mean, obviously,
it's not ideal.
Buses are one of our prime locations where we have a captive audience, or at least a captured audience for at least a few minutes, and we'll be able to get the riders' opinions and make sure that they're definitely aware.
Yeah, and certainly bilingual too. And probably,
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. Scott.
Just to piggyback off of that, sorry, Scott.
It's okay, go on ahead.
Just thinking about having paper as well. Some of the places we could drop those off or outreach to would be like DSS in their waiting room, and the hotels where we're placing people, warming center, where we see our transit, all those places where we see our transit populations, but also our Trudy Farber building in Ellenville. We have senior lunches there Monday through Thursdays. The food banks, Family of Woodstock, People's Place, all of those places where we have our populations that are using transit or may need it more than others.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. And so as we get to that point in the study, and we'll begin to do outreach, the Technical Advisory Committee providing us with that insight and encouragement, we'll look very forward to having that assistance and keeping us, making sure we're staying on the right track and maximizing our ability to get the word out. Scott, did you have something?
No, I think SC captured a little bit of that, so thank you.
Great, thanks. And for those who joined a little late, we did record this presentation so you can see an overview of the project, and we'll share that after the meeting. Jared, do you want to move into some of our wrap-up slides here?
Yes. All right, well, thank you all for the discussion. Sometimes I open the floor to discussion and it's just really quiet and I get very uncomfortable. So I appreciate everyone's participation. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a project website hosted by the Ulster County General Project general website. It's pretty blank right now, but we're hoping to start filling it out as content becomes available and the project gets on its feet with, after we rename it, for example. Like we said earlier, Brian is probably the best point of contact if you have any questions, but feel free to CC me as well. We'll just use him to sort of triage and consolidate requests, just to make sure that things don't slip through the cracks. And that's about all I have from the closing aspect. I just want to thank you all for, again, the great discussion and looking forward to this group. I think we have a good diversity of experiences and opinions and expertise that will help round this out. Brian, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, thanks everyone for joining us for the kickoff. We appreciate it. Again, I'll send a link to the website. There's not a lot of content there at this point in time, but as Jared said, we will be building that out and using it extensively as the project evolves. If you have any questions, and including thinking about who is not here today that perhaps should be, is always a question we like to keep in mind. Whether they're appropriate for the technical advisory committee or not is something we can think about internally. But some of our first ribbon outreach, who we want to get to and who some of those key stakeholders might be. If you have thoughts on that, you can share those with me at any time, and we will keep an active list of some of those other individuals and organizations out there that will assist us in getting the word out, but should also be informed about the project. And again, there will be extensive public outreach, which will share that plan with you in a matter of weeks. Any final thoughts or questions before we let everyone go for the weekend?
Will that outreach be bilingual?
Yes, we have contracted for bilingual outreach, and we'll make sure that all materials, when published, will have a bilingual component to them. And our website is now ADA compliant, including bilingual. I think we have nearly every language available for quick translation of our website as well.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I thought I was sharing this entire time. There's our contact information.
Great. Better late than never. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I think we're good here, right? All right, folks. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. We're very excited to get this project underway. It's been many months in the making. So we'll be in touch.
Bye, everyone.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you,
thanks,
everybody.
Brian.
Yeah, bye
Thanks,
now.
Jared.
Have a good weekend.
Enjoy your
Thank
weekend,
you.
everyone. Thank you.